He left me on a mountain in Malaysia. Just turned around, called me a bad girlfriend one last time, and walked away, leaving me alone on a jungle trail in a foreign country, exhausted, nauseated, and unable to stand without my legs shaking. No phone with local service. No map. No goodbye. Just the sound of his footsteps disappearing into the trees and the slow, stomach-dropping realization that he was actually gone. And here is the thing I need you to understand before I tell you anything else. I did not see it for what it was. Not that day. Not for a long time after. I went home. I stayed in the relationship a little longer. I told myself it was a rough day. I made myself smaller and quieter and more accommodating so it would not happen again. It took years. It took reading about another woman, a woman who had gone on a hike and never came home, before I finally let myself say the words out loud. He could have got me killed. And a stranger, a man who owed me absolutely nothing, who had never met me before that afternoon, was the only reason he did not. This is that story. Let me take you back to where it started. Before we get to the mountain, before we get to the moment that changed everything, you need to understand who we were. Because what happened on that trail did not begin in Malaysia. It began long before that, in the quiet, ordinary moments where patterns get established so gradually that you do not notice them until they have already shaped everything around you. I was in my mid-20s when I met him. I was the kind of person who said yes too easily, who valued harmony over conflict, who genuinely believed that being a good partner meant being endlessly flexible. He was confident, certain. He had opinions about everything, what to eat, where to go, what mattered, what did not, and he delivered those opinions with an authority I confused for strength. I mistook his certainty for security. I thought I had found someone who knew exactly where he was going and was willing to take me along for the ride. Hiking was his passion. Genuinely. He had been doing it for years, long trails, serious elevation, multi-day treks through remote terrain. He had all the gear, the maps, the knowledge. He lived for it. And I respected that. I always believed people should have things they are passionate about. The problem was never his passion for hiking. The problem was what he believed that passion entitled him to. I had never hiked a single day in my life. I was not athletic and I did not pretend to be. I told him this clearly and honestly early in the relationship, and he said he understood. We had our own interests, our own separate hobbies. That was supposed to be fine. For a while, it was. And then, slowly, so slowly I barely felt it happening, it stopped being fine at all. The first time he brought up hiking together, I declined. Politely. I told him I had no experience, that I was not physically prepared for a serious trail, and that I was genuinely worried about holding him back. He said he understood. We moved on. That was month 3 of our relationship. By month 6, the subject was back, this time with a different tone. He had found a trail in Malaysia, beautiful, he said. Life-changing, he said. He had built an entire trip around it, and now my continued reluctance had been quietly reclassified in his mind from a reasonable personal limit to a character flaw. That was when the guilt trips started. Not dramatic ones, small ones. He would mention, almost casually, all the restaurants he had sat through that were not his first choice. All the films we had watched together that he had not really wanted to see. He had been keeping score, apparently, and now the ledger had come due. I do things for you, he said. Why won't you do this for me? I need to pause here and name what was happening, because it matters. There is a fundamental difference between compromising on dinner reservations and being pressured into a physically demanding activity in a foreign country that you have already explained you are not capable of doing safely. Those are not equivalent concessions. Presenting them as equivalent is manipulation. But when you have been inside a relationship long enough that your own judgment has been slowly, steadily undermined, when month after month you have been nudged to believe your instincts are overreactions and your concerns are inconveniences, the logic does not land the way it should. So I caved. I told myself I would train, I would prepare, I would manage. And more than anything, I told myself that he would not let anything bad happen to me. I still wince at that. The person I was afraid of was also the person I was trusting to keep me safe. That single sentence tells you everything about where I was. Here is a detail that I think about more than almost anything else from that period, and I want you to pay attention to it. In the weeks before the trip, I genuinely tried to prepare. I went on longer walks. I bought proper footwear. I looked up what to expect on mountain trails in Malaysian humidity, and I asked him multiple times directly about the difficulty of the route, the elevation, how many hours, what the terrain was like, what he thought I should be ready for. Every single time, I got some variation of the same answer. It will be fine, not facts, not data, not a realistic assessment of the trail from someone who had done the research. Just dismissal dressed up as reassurance. When I pressed, when I suggested we maybe do a shorter practice hike first, asked to see a trail map, looked for something concrete, he told me I was overthinking it, that I was letting anxiety ruin the excitement, that his passion for hiking meant he knew what we were getting into and I should trust him. Do you see what was happening there? He was not just dismissing my concerns. He was actively preventing me from making an informed decision. If I had known the actual difficulty of that trail, the real elevation, the real duration, the real heat and humidity conditions, I might have refused more firmly. I might have held the line. He could not risk that. So he gave me just enough vague reassurance to keep me compliant and not nearly enough real information to protect myself. We flew to Malaysia. The first evening was fine. He was in a good mood, almost charming, talking about the route, pointing at pictures on his phone, describing what we would see at the summit. I let myself believe I had been wrong to worry so much. We packed our bags before sunrise, and we started the climb. The trail opened ahead of us, lush, green, impossibly steep. Within the first 20 minutes, I knew with the kind of certainty that settles in the bones. I had made a mistake. Within the first hour, I was in over my head in ways I could not hide and could not negotiate with. The trail was steeper than anything I had imagined, and the humidity was not just uncomfortable. It was a physical weight on every breath, every step, every attempt to push through. I kept moving. I did not want to slow him down. I did not want to become the problem he already seemed to expect me to be. So I pushed through the burning in my legs and the tightness in my chest and the way the heat pressed in from every direction, and I kept my mouth shut and I kept going. He barely looked back. By the second hour, I could not hide it anymore. My pace had dropped and he could see it. My breathing was audible. And then the nausea started, that particular, horrible variety that comes when heat and dehydration and physical exertion hit at the same time. Like the floor has dropped out from underneath your stomach. I asked if we could slow down. He sighed, a long, deliberate sigh. He stopped and waited for me to catch up. He did not say anything cruel, not yet, but the silence communicated exactly as much as words would have. By the third hour, I had to stop completely. I found a flat rock at the side of the trail, sat down, and told him plainly that I needed to go back. I was not okay. The nausea was getting worse. My legs were shaking. I was dizzy. I had water, but not enough. Every signal my body had, it was sending. I was at my limit and I had passed it, and going further was no longer something I was willing to do. He stood there and looked at me for a moment. And then, with the patience of someone who had rehearsed this, he began talking about money. How much the trip had cost. The flights. The accommodation, everything he had planned, everything he had been looking forward to, all of it ruined. He looked at me like I was something that had broken at the worst possible time. I said I was sorry. I said I understood the trip mattered to him, but I needed to go back down. And that was the moment I saw his face change. I have replayed what happened next more times than I can count. In therapy. In journals I have long since filled. In the quiet of too many sleepless nights. Because what he said in those few minutes is burned into me with a clarity that nothing else from that entire relationship possesses. He stood over me, and I want you to hold this image for a moment because the details matter. I was sitting on a rock. I was sick. I was in a foreign country. I was on a trail I had never wanted to be on. I was hours from the nearest road, in a jungle, in humid midday heat, with water running low. And he stood above me and delivered his verdict like he had been waiting for the right moment to use it. He called me a bad girlfriend. He said I was unfit. He used the word lazy. He told me I should have trained before the trip if I was serious about the relationship. He said he had known for a long time that I was not truly committed to him and that this moment proved it. He said every single word of it coldly, precisely. Not shouting, not the kind of anger that comes from being overwhelmed. This was controlled, deliberate, surgical, like each word had been selected in advance for maximum damage. And then he turned around and kept walking. Up the trail, away from me, without hesitation, without a single glance back. I sat there and I waited. I told myself he was venting, that he would stop after 50 meters, cool down, turn around. Because surely, no person who claimed to love you would genuinely, actually leave you alone and sick and disoriented in the middle of a jungle in a foreign country. The minutes passed. He did not come back. I had no working map, barely any signal. My water was almost gone. I did not know how far I was from the trailhead or whether I could safely navigate the descent alone in my condition. I was completely, terrifyingly alone. And the fear, not the background anxiety I had carried for years, but real, immediate physical fear, moved in. I do not know exactly how long I sat on that rock. Time does strange things when you are frightened. The nausea came and went in waves. The water ran low. The sounds of the jungle, which had seemed beautiful that morning, had taken on a different quality, present, close, enormous. I was aware of how alone I was in a way I had never been before. Not just physically alone on a trail, but alone in the most foundational sense. No one in the world knew exactly where on this trail I was sitting right now. I ran through my options the way you do when you are scared, and none of the options are good. I could try to call him no signal. I could try to walk back down alone, but I was dizzy and I did not fully trust my judgment or my legs on the descent. I could stay and wait and hope someone came. I cycled through these options on repeat, each one worse than the last, when I heard footsteps on the trail behind me. A man came around the bend. Local, I could tell immediately by the way he moved through the terrain, the ease of someone who had done this trail hundreds of times. He slowed when he saw me. He did not call out or speed up or make a performance of noticing. He just looked at me the way you look at someone when you can tell, before any words are spoken, that something is wrong. He asked, simply and quietly, if I was okay. I told him the truth, or as much as I could manage in that moment, that I was nauseated, that I had been hiking with a friend. I still used the word friend, even then, and that my friend had gone ahead without me, that I was not sure I could make it back down safely on my own. He did not ask a dozen follow-up questions. He did not look skeptical. He did not hesitate. He opened his pack, took out an electrolyte drink, and held it out to me, and then he said 3 words I will never forget for the rest of my life. "Let's get you down." He picked up my bag, he carried it, and we started walking. The walk down took a while, long enough that we talked. I learned he was a local hiking guide who knew these trails like a second language, and his footing on the descent was confident and sure even where the path was steepest. As we walked, I found myself saying more than I intended to. I still softened the story. I still said friend instead of boyfriend. I still trimmed the edges of what had actually happened, out of some reflex I cannot fully explain, protecting him, maybe, or protecting myself from having to say it plainly. But the guide listened. He asked no probing questions. He just listened. And somewhere on that descent, he said something quiet and matter-of-fact that I have thought about nearly every day since. "Your so-called friend," he said, "is no good." 3 words, not angry, not dramatic, not wrapped in advice or caveats, just a plain statement of fact, offered with the same simplicity as noting the weather. He had seen what happened in 30 seconds and he named it without ambiguity. And it landed differently than anything I had heard before, because he was a stranger. He had no stake in the story, no reason to protect me from the truth or soften it for my comfort. He just saw clearly and spoke clearly, and I had no defenses left to argue with him. At the base of the trail, he offered me a ride to my hostel. I accepted. When we arrived, I reached for my wallet. I wanted to pay him for everything, the drink, the bag, the walk, the ride, all of it. He refused, would not take a single ringgit. Instead, he told me this. What he had done was small. It was just basic human courtesy. He said he extended the same to everyone on that trail. He said the real dangers out there were not the elevation or the heat. The real dangers were worse things. People got lost. People got hurt. People got taken. He said the most dangerous thing on that mountain on that day had not been the terrain. It had been the person I had come with. And then, quietly, not as a condition of his help, not as a lecture, just as one human being asking something reasonable of another, he asked me not to go back to that person. My ex was at the hostel when I arrived. He was in the common area, sitting with a drink, looking completely unbothered. He glanced up when I walked through the door, and I watched his face run through a quick sequence of calculations, surprised that I was there, something that flickered briefly like relief, but recalibrated fast into mild irritation. And then, because he was good at reading what a situation required of him, a pivot into something approximating concern. He asked how I had gotten down. I told him a guide had helped me. He nodded. And then, and I want you to really let this land, he told me I should have been more prepared. That this was a lesson I needed to learn, that maybe now I would take my fitness more seriously going forward. I did not respond. I went to bed. The trip ended a few days later. We flew home. And the way these things go, the way they are designed to go, in relationships built on slow erosion, I did not leave immediately. I stayed for a while longer. He offered an apology of sorts. The kind that is not really an apology. I am sorry you felt that way. I should not have left, but you were being difficult. The kind that recenters the problem in the person who was wronged, that makes the wronged party feel like they are owed clarity rather than given it. And I accepted it. I told myself it would not happen again. I told myself we needed better communication. I told myself he had learned something from this. That is the thing about that kind of manipulation, it does not always announce itself loudly. It settles in quietly. It makes you the one who needs to be more patient, more understanding, more adaptable. By the time you recognize the pattern clearly enough to name it, you have already given more of yourself than you meant to. The relationship ended eventually, not in a dramatic confrontation. Just quietly, as things do when the weight of carrying them becomes too heavy to justify. There was no final reckoning. No moment of his public exposure. No devastating closing line. It just ended, and I was too depleted to feel anything except relief. But the real reckoning, the one that actually mattered, that was still years ahead of me. The real reckoning came years later. I was reading the news one evening, one of those stories that finds you on a quiet night and does not let go. A woman, a hiking trail. She had not come home. By the time anyone found her, it was too late. I read that story and I went completely still, because I thought about that rock in Malaysia. I thought about how alone I had been. I thought about the water running low and the phone with barely any signal and the fact that no one in the world knew exactly where on that trail I was sitting. I thought about what the guide had said, quietly, in the way someone says things when they have personally seen the alternative up close. People get lost. People get hurt. People get taken. He had said those words matter-of-factly, not to frighten me, just because they were true and he wanted me to understand what true was. And I thought about how lucky I had been. Randomly, profoundly, undeservedly lucky. The guide had come around that bend at exactly the right moment. Different weather. Later in the day. A trail walked less frequently, any single variation in any of those factors, and he does not come. And I am alone, getting sicker, making decisions on failing judgment in an unfamiliar landscape, in a foreign country, on a trail I never wanted to be on. And the worst-case scenarios, the ones I had pushed away because thinking about them was too much, those become real. My ex did not leave me because he was selfish and needed space to cool down. He left me in conditions that could have caused my death. He left me sick and alone in a jungle in a foreign country and kept walking. And for years, I had softened that truth into something more manageable. A bad day on a hike. An argument that got out of hand. A partner with a short fuse. I had made the story smaller so I could keep living inside it. But sitting there reading about that woman who did not come home, the story would not stay small anymore. He placed me in genuine physical danger. He did it calmly, deliberately, and then he sat in the common area of a hostel drinking and waited for me to come back or not. And when I did come back, he told me I should have been more prepared. I was done making that story smaller. Here is the karma in this story, and I know it is not the kind some of you were expecting. There is no viral post, no public confrontation, no moment where he gets cornered in front of everyone who ever believed him and forced to account for himself. Real karma does not always work that way. Real karma is quieter, more patient, and sometimes far more profound than any scene you could write for it. The karma is that I got out, that I am sitting here, years later, whole and safe and free, able to tell this story, while he is out there somewhere, still looking for the next woman whose self-doubt he can use as a lever. And I genuinely, calmly hope that every woman he approaches from here forward sees it faster than I did. The karma is the guide. This man who owed me nothing, who had no obligation to slow his pace, hand me his drink, pick up my bag, drive me across town to my hostel, or look me in the eye and tell me the plain truth about the person I had come there with. He did all of those things. He asked for nothing in return except that I take his advice seriously. He told me the favor he had done was small, that it was just basic courtesy, the kind any decent person extends. He was wrong about that. It was not small. It was the thing that made everything else possible. And I took his advice. I want you to take something from this story too, not just the satisfaction of watching a bad person face consequences, though that satisfaction is real and it is earned. I want you to take this. If you are in a relationship where your physical limits are being ignored, where your concerns are routinely dismissed, where you are being guilt-tripped into situations that feel genuinely unsafe, that is not a communication problem. That is not a rough patch. That is someone showing you, clearly and consistently, that your safety is less important to them than their preference. No trip, no argument about compromise, no amount of ledger keeping is worth your life. The guide was right. Some things that happen in the forest cannot be undone. If this story stayed with you, if something in it felt familiar, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to Cold Karma. We are here every day with stories of betrayal, of justice, and of the quiet moments when karma finally arrives. You never have to face it alone.